I call Catherine Delahunty.
Yeah. Tēnā koutou te whare, and I find this a very complex and interesting bill, and I'm really wanting to just point out a couple of things that have, in the very interesting debate that we've had tonight and the excellent SOPs that Eugenia Sage and opposition have put up. I also want to bring us back to something, and I just want to quote the words of the Kaihotu of Ngāti Pāoa Iwi Trust and co-negotiator of the Iwi's treaty settlement, Hoa Uri Rawari, quote, "The bill is treaty settlement legislation for Ngāti Pāoa to regain ownership and control of significant customary land at Te Tau Oma is central to the historical treaty settlement between the Crown and Ngāti Pāoa. Without this land, there will be no treaty settlement between the Crown and Ngāti Pāoa." And that's where it gets complicated, because this has undoubtedly been a messy process. It has undoubtedly upset the local people who live there at the moment very much. It has undoubtedly been a bad use of, in a way, the legal process because of all of the people that have been shut out. But there is a deeper issue as well, which is why it is a nuanced and complex situation, despite the failures of this bill. And that's because I live in Hauraki and I look across to Ngāti Pāoa, and there is not a lot of land under their control, and they don't have all the opportunities in the world. And many people who are settled, living in the city with their good homes and their gardens and their lovely views, and their right to enjoy themselves, need to also think about the history of colonisation in this country and how the Reserves Act, in its previous iterations, has been used to actually strip Māori land from people. So if we're going to talk about the word reserve, we need to acknowledge some of the history. The other day I was up at Ngāti Whātua ki Ōrākei, and I said to them, what's your view of this bill? Because it's really complex and difficult and seems to be very badly designed. And they said, the ones I talked to, the people I talked to, they said, it's Ngāti Pāoa land. End of story. So that doesn't make it any easier when the Crown has actually got another agenda, but that's their view. And I think it's interesting to consider the whole question of good faith here. And the whole question is, because this is so poorly designed and has created so much negativity, it actually impacts on the treaty settlement that Ngāti Pāoa are trying to advance, and this bill is part of that for them. And that's where we need to be a lot more sophisticated in this country in the way that we deal with this, because we do not want the population who currently live in Auckland to have a complete lack of understanding about what's possible. And I think Ngāti Whātua ki Ōrākei give a good example of how you can have housing for income stream, housing for papakainga. You can have high standards of environmental protection. In fact, I'd say that Ngāti Whātua have got some of the highest standards of community-based environmental protection across Tamaki. And that Ngāti Pāoa have indicated that they want to go down that track as well and have talked about how they might do it. But that's become lost in the conflict over the inability of the Crown to design a bill that actually has good process in it. And so it's ludicrous to pretend that this is a simple issue and it's just about people having green space in Auckland, because it's not. And once upon a time, in Tamaki Makaurau, that land was all land belonging to different iwi. And now they are forced into these situations where people are talking about them as if they couldn't possibly manage their land with conservation values, because only we have conservation values. I think that's really problematic, and it's not helpful to the local people, because they've been felt really deeply excluded by the way that this has been gone about. It's not going to help them to understand Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And that's really bad for our country. It's really important that actually we look at Point England and everywhere else in terms of what are the mana whenua people who were there before, who suffered the same, if not far worse, alienation from their land that the people in that area are feeling like they're experiencing now. So, it concerns me deeply when I see Pākehā people protesting in the reserve saying that, we're having our land taken off us. Mr. Chair.
Catherine Delahunty.
It concerns me deeply that people are saying that without recognising or not understanding, because they feel abused by this process through this parliament, that actually they need a relationship with the mana whenua, and that the mana whenua have legitimate expectations around their own land, and that this is a pre-settlement bill, but it's been done in such a way that it has caused people to feel like they are the most aggrieved party. But actually, we have to understand history. And if we look at the Reserves Act, which is mentioned throughout this bill and has been treated cavalierly in many ways, it's done some pretty bad things. And if you look at Hauturu, Little Barrier, they did some pretty bad things to create that nature reserve. So let's try and actually include everybody in this conversation, and let's have some faith that Ngāti Paoa and the local community, with the right support, could actually craft a solution to this that doesn't polarise everyone against each other, and it doesn't turn it into supposedly the treaty versus the doctorals, which should never be characterised as, and it is not, because they also have a whakapapa connection to those manu. So we have to be more sophisticated than this, and we have to try to look at this bill and say, from the point of view of the mana whenua, they're trying to work towards their treaty settlement, and this is the shot they've been given in Auckland where there's very little whenua. And it's okay for them to want to have an economic base as well as a marae, as well as a reserve that they have shown no interest in excluding people from in terms of its long-term future. But that's got lost because of the way that this bill has been structured, the way it's been worded, the way the process has been managed. So it's pitched the people, mana whenua and local people, against each other, when instead the Crown needs to take some responsibility for this mess. And it concerns me deeply because actually Te Tiriti is a good thing, and historical grievance need to be resolved, and land that was taken should be returned, and trust that's been broken should be supported on all sides. And we need our local communities living on the coast in Tamaki to understand that yes, they want to keep their space, but they can have that in relationship to other people's needs as well, and to recognise mana whenua and to recognise Te Tiriti. But that's all got lost. And it's very, very disturbing. And there are better ways to go about this. I was at Parihaka 2 weeks ago. That's a better way to go about it, where there's a genuine and careful process whereby the mana whenua got to advance their need for reconciliation before they got to settlement. And this is another form of pre-settlement. But I just feel very deeply for all the people involved in this who feel they've been abused, but to remember who lost their land originally and how that happened, and what pittance they were paid so that they could be alienated from that beautiful coastal land, that lovely bit of coast, because it's amazing around there. So, if we're going to be precious about it, we need to have a bigger conversation and be capable of more than just talking about one set of interests in the 21st century, because we cannot escape our history. We don't want to escape our history. We want to uplift it and do better. This bill is written in such a way and has created such a lot of confusion that all it's done is make people feel that they should prescribe for Ngāti Paoa how they should be and what they're capable of, which is actually not the Treaty of Waitangi, Te Tiriti of Waitangi. It's not Article 2 at all. So we have a problem, and we need to be more creative than this bill is, but not at the expense of recognising the legitimate and absolute right of the mana whenua to assert their relationship to their whenua. And they've never said they're going to exclude everybody else. Sometimes when things have been done badly, people who've done those things assume that the other culture would do the same back. Let's actually be a bit bigger than that, and let's have a bit more generosity. So I say it's complex, it's not simple, and it's not going to be easily resolved through this bill. and I'm afraid of what gets left behind after the bill passes. But I'm absolutely committed to supporting Ngāti Paua because they don't have the homes, the land, the income stream.
Ko Kelvin Davis.
It's the Chair, and I'd like to talk to Part 6.